Can everyone hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Is it clear? Because some sessions were not, so I don't want to be muffling in your ear. Good? Okay. Please wave me down if anything. So hi, everyone. My name is Fatima. I'm from Gartner, and I speak to hundreds of clients a year on their Agile transformation journey. And we're here today because the overwhelming sentiment in my conversations, and you can see from this data point as well, that 41% of organizations are not satisfied with Agile. And this is almost half of us, right? So that's a pretty staggering percentage. And it's increasing. I think there's more regulations I'm seeing in other sessions. There's definitely more need to be risk averse, but definitely it's increasing the skeptical around Agile. And many of your peers across industries and geographies have been on this journey for many years. They've tried multiple attempts and avenues to transform the mindsets and ways of working. And they failed. They failed, time after time again, and continuously getting derailed. So I help clients try to find out where their pitfalls are and how to get back on track. And the reality is that people that feel this way or have a negative experience are because they're getting stuck into the habit of doing Agile. So doing Agile means adopting the mechanics of Agile, the prescribed frameworks that we're following, the set of processes, or adopting practices and investing in tools. But it doesn't mean that our organization understands the value of Agile as well as is committed to Agile. So we're likely to get started with half-hearted buy-in from stakeholders. And organizations who are in this phase tend to see very limited transformation and limited improvement in their goals. So what we want to do is focus on being Agile. Now, being Agile is about embracing the mindset and principles of Agile, continuously improving ways of working, software delivery processes, and experimenting and making change on a small scale through pilots. And being Agile is a complete culture shift at all altitudes of the organization to the point where everyone must live these values. And most of us are on the way to becoming Agile, but there are still obstacles that stand in our way. And so the purpose of the session today is how we can look for these obstacles along the path to achieving agility so that we can navigate through them or completely avoid hitting them if we're aware of what those symptoms are. And we'll do so by going over 3 parts to remedying your Agile efforts. First will be around assessing your own transformation efforts. Then we'll look at symptoms of transformation failure that your peers have experienced, as well as resetting a shared transformational message. So really the first section is about how important it is to understand and assess the current state of your Agile transformation. And we need to know not just what's not working well, but why. What is the reason? Why do people feel a certain way? And leaders I speak to can probably intuitively tell that things aren't going well or that there is a clash between teams, and they jump to remedy the situation before actually understanding what's wrong. I hear a lot of, I think my teams, feel this way, or I'm just kind of guessing, right? So we want to understand what are a lot of common complaints and what are people saying when they struggle with Agile. So the first point here is that 68% say not enough leadership participation is the top challenge to Agile transformation. So as we can see, it's probably easiest at the team level, but once you need to scale beyond that, it really depends on involving change agents from business level executive sponsorship to PMO and HR. So these are other parts of the organization that have an impact on aligning teams and resources and making sure that they are structured in the right way. And the next one is 46% of organizations say inadequate management support. And so when we think about management, it is your people managers, but it is also your team leads that are considered in this, and your day-to-day coaches as well. So guiding team members is so important. People need the encouragement and support to be able to unearth these consistent feedback and be able to feed it back to executives. And from my conversations with your peers, I can tell you that a lot of times they're experiencing both of these challenges. So leadership and management is really blocking the organization's ability to embrace these principles. And you know, organizations who have done this type of exercise well have benefited from pausing to reflect. So those high-performing organizations, their teams will usually conduct continuous retrospectives where the teams are understanding what barriers exist in the team's ability to deliver value. And it got me wondering, you know, how often are managers and leadership doing these retrospectives as well when it comes to how is the transformation effort going? So your journey needs to be agile by self-reflecting as an opportunity to assess whether the transformation is strategically aligned, continuously improving, and has the stakeholder support across the organization. And from my conversations and knowing what some of those challenges are, when you are self-reflecting on your Agile progress, these are some key areas that we want you to reflect on. So first, we want you to look at whether the Agile transformation is contributing to greater business outcomes. So ask yourself, are teams and leaders aligned to a common goal for the transformation? Are senior leaders clear on why they should sponsor this effort to begin with? Next, you want to look at uncovering any legacy behaviors and processes stalling your transformation. So is there any organizational policies, governance barriers, or cultural challenges impeding Agile practices? You want to also look at root causes of stakeholder resistance. So as I mentioned, you might have an inkling into some people that are less likely to collaborate outside of their own groups. But instead of just deeming that person hard to work with, you want to uncover why they are struggling to get involved and engage these teams. And by listening, you're actually showing empathy for partner functions. And I was speaking to a client where he is a software engineering leader. I speak to mainly leaders and their teams. He set up regular meetings with key business sponsors and governance partners like security, like finance, so that they can more regularly communicate and manage expectations. And the last two are really on the Agile value. So it's important to ask yourself, as I mentioned in the retrospective, you know, are you demonstrating the behaviors that you want your teams to encompass? Are you open to taking feedback? Are you investing in your own learning and encouraging others to do so as well? So you have to show those behaviors that you're wanting others to emulate. And what's surprising is that our research shows, especially with C-suite members, 97% of them believe that they exhibit and role model Agile behaviors, but only 2% of delivery team members agree. So that's quite shocking as well in terms of the misconceptions or in perceptions about our capabilities. And then lastly, I think I've been hitting on this as well. It is about the teams, but it's more than just getting them to do their work faster. We need to understand How are they feeling? What's their sentiment? Do they see the value in new ways of working, or do they think it's a process implementation? So you don't want to just think about Agile as layering a framework over your existing processes, because that's not going to work. People have to make it work for their specific context. And so reflecting on these 5 subjects and areas will give you a good grounding of where there could potentially be challenges or cultural resistance, really, in the organization's ability to be flexible, adaptive, and collaborative. And so really, just to drive this section home, continuous improvement requires reflection, not just at the team level, but at all levels of the organization. In the medical field, if anyone's been in the medical field, you know that it's vital to receive a comprehensive diagnosis if you want to begin treatment at the best chance for proper healing. And so we need to think about that as well when we jump to invest in maybe new technologies or consultants to understand how can we fix this problem. The diagnosis is really going to make a difference in how you choose to properly heal that situation. And it's also helpful to know what signs to look out for, right? What symptoms so that you could be proactive. And across Gartner, not just myself, my colleagues, we speak to thousands of organizations, and we notice that there are common symptoms that end up resulting in undesirable consequences. And we call this an anti-pattern. So it's not just some teams experiencing these challenges. These are large-scale cultural problems. And so we're going to go over 4. And so while I go over the 4, multiple might apply to you, but definitely look out for what some of the symptoms might be. And I'll go ahead and start with the first one. The first one is called partial agile. Some may use the term, or you may have heard of water scrum fall. And so that basically means that some of the symptoms here are you have agile teams that are not full-fledged. So for example, you have a partially committed product owner, or your teams don't have a product owner at all, or other agile team members don't exist.
Yes. Hello.
You also have legacy processes like big architecture up front, big design up front that are forced into the agile lifecycle. You have many dependencies with non-agile teams because it's really just the Scrum team that's able to practice their sprints, but everyone else is working as usual. And that leads to the developers handing big chunks of work over to testing, to operations, which makes it really difficult to release frequently. And so to remedy this situation, we want to think about identifying who the teams work with along the delivery process. Who are their suppliers, in the sense that who's providing them services as the other governance partners, and who are their consumers, who's consuming their services. Can we map out those relationships between the delivery teams so that we can better understand these groups' needs and better collaborating with them? So that's the first tip that I give clients that find themselves in this symptom. You want to improve that relationship gradually with these groups, and then slowly start to combine the work of these groups until they can become a cross-functional and capable team performing across the life cycle. The next anti-pattern is called subverted. Subverted is if Agile is poorly understood or undermined by stakeholders. So this means that organizations are not understanding the true value of Agile. It's been misinterpreted, and they're starting to blame Agile for why certain things aren't working. Like, I have clients tell me they can't even use the word Agile anymore in their organizations because it has such a negative connotation. So I don't know if it's that bad for you guys, but I definitely have had those calls recently. And so in terms of this anti-pattern, you might find teams creating their own workarounds to Agile. Like, for example, we use Scrum, but we don't do daily Scrums or daily stand-ups because they see it as overkill. There's low engagement from the teams. So I had one leader tell me that their teams did hold the Agile ceremonies, but there was very low engagement. They were just doing it to say they did. And it was really just the minimum amount of members there. No extra people joining to get additional expertise from. And the last few are really, there's little evidence of improvement since moving to Agile, as well as stakeholders falling back on and actually romanticizing previous ways of working. So it's easy to blame something new for the challenge, but we probably wanted to do this in the first place for a reason, right? So the past is not the place to look if you want to look to improve. And so to remedy this situation, you need to foster a culture that prioritizes continuous learning and try to slowly recognize progress. Instead of big wins or releases, include small wins, small pockets of success to help motivate teams to pursue continuous learning and Agile adoption. And so by celebrating success and advocating for other teams, you're building that momentum, but you're also demonstrating from a leadership posture that learning is recognized as a value at the highest level. On to number 3. This is called dishonest Agile. So organizations with this anti-pattern said they feel like they pretty much are just saying that they're Agile, even though they still deliver work the same as usual. And when I hear leaders say that, it's a sign of dishonest Agile. So there's really no effort to change. Teams look the same as they always have. They deliver work exactly the way they always have done. Agile is superficial in the sense that teams might be retitled to Agile teams. You might change a few IT roles like business analysts or project managers to product owners and scrum masters, but not really giving them any of the training, not changing their mandate or expectations. And then really the team meetings are focused on waterfall metrics, their status updates, and tracking where we are and what point we're at in delivery. There's no realization or impact on the customer or the business. And last, teams are far removed from the customer. So developers don't have access to customer feedback, or whoever is the product owner on this team is not effective in communicating customer voice. And so this does require, in terms of basically starting from scratch, I would say this is the least adoption of Agile out of the 4 patterns. You really want to leverage coaching. I know you might have maybe started with coaching and then they're no longer there, but really this is what coaches are meant to do, is convey and reiterate executive commitment to change. So messages from leadership and coaches can help reinforce Agile values. So you want leaders of the organization to grow comfort with change by demonstrating Agile practices gradually and working towards delivering value through small pilots. And for some teams, that might be, even if they're not fully switching to Agile right now, they could still be measuring delivery outcomes over outputs. And for others, that might mean hosting demos for their customers. So again, just gradually implementing Agile. I always say be Agile about implementing Agile. And the last and the fourth, I'm running through this because I don't know where the time went, so I'm just going to hurry up because I have another section. The last is corrupted Agile. So organizations tell me that in this, and this is probably one of the more toxic ones in terms of the values are actually deliberately misapplied, leading to command and control practices. And so symptoms can range from mild to severe. But if you are hearing things like leaders and managers trying to track teams and how they're spending their time, rather than using metrics to empower teams, or you might notice that software development is basically a production line. They're seen as fungible resources that could be replaced. They're part of a larger machine and full of manual approvals and stage gates. And that really prevents the teams from being empowered and autonomous. So curing this anti-pattern requires empowering teams and trusting them to own their product and be able to manage it. And that's a big shift from traditional command and control leadership. But to remedy this corrupt culture, teams need the autonomy to experiment in new ways to deliver value. One leader that I spoke to did this by evolving their communication to frame challenges as opportunities to learn. This helped teams feel safe to share their ideas and suggest improvements without any backlash. And they recognized the teams. The teams that said they were going to do this but actually took risks and iterated towards value were recognized and applauded in the organization. So these are the 4 symptoms. You can come back to the symptoms and try to create recognition of where your transformation might be potentially going wrong. And what the remedies are doing, it's not a quick fix for sure. And in fact, it's important to know that there isn't a silver bullet to fix these symptoms and anti-patterns. In fact, quick fixes can further perpetuate the pain you're experiencing. So leadership and management are uniquely positioned to reinforce genuine intent to change. So it starts with diagnosing where you guys are today so that you can use actual context to propel why the need to change is moving forward. And it helps teams and stakeholders understand how you've deviated, so in the future you can make timely adjustments. And just think about, again, starting small with an improvement or a comeback. So look out for smaller opportunities to remove impediments or try new practices, even if you're piloting that new governance approval process, right? It doesn't have to be sent out to all teams at once. And so thinking about that and communicating and recognizes the behaviors you hope to see will improve the value of Agile. And with that, I am going to quickly go over the last section. And it really is around aligning to shared Agile transformation goals so that you know how to regroup and reset. To quote a famous ancient philosopher, if one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable. So without a reset of transformation objectives, you risk investing in adjustments that push you back into anti-patterns. And so, you need to think about what some other clients are doing in terms of the goal is not to be Agile. The goal is to improve business outcomes, right? And so there's not a percentage of agility that's going to deem your organization successful. And to do this, there's some tips for crafting a message. You basically want to avoid being generic. You have to use real problems and real context from your organization. Use a sprint to test out your message. Don't get stuck to one message and then lack the feedback mechanisms. And then try to avoid, overly used corporate language and jargon. Again, if it sounds generic, then it just looks like some general IT transformation that everyone is bored about. And I am done. Agile is the destination, and it's a journey towards evolving enterprise outcomes. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And if you guys are interested in speaking to a Gartner specialist or want to look at more resources, you can take a picture of that QR code And I'll stand in the corner here with any questions or follow-up.